Hey guys, it's me, Caroline. I wanted to just share with you what we were going over in our class for the second class, which is really one of my favorites because while the first class is great because it introduces you to kind of how Love and Logic likes to word things, phrase things, gives you a little introduction to, what Love and Logic means. There's even more meat in the second class that I teach, and especially when you're here with me live in the different videos that I show featuring Dr. Charles and Jim Fay, who are the CEOs of Love and Logic Institution and the creators and founders of this. We have these videos that we show of little stories that they have, and they're very witty and very funny. And after the first meeting, it seems like people are kind of used to, they now have come to expect it. The first meeting, that's kind of like, what? We're going to watch these videos. We're not just going to listen to this person speak, which is actually, I think, why the program works so well. But sorry for you guys. You have to just listen to me speak. So sorry. I will make it quick and simple, though, because the techniques that we offer in the second class are really some of my favorites. Remember, last week we talked about going brain dead, especially if you have been given an invitation to an argument or any kind of, nagging that a child is doing, or even just being defiant, just going brain dead and quietly and calmly repeating your one-liner, which mine is, I understand. I understand. But what did I say? And I make it as boring and as quiet as I possibly can. And so this week we're going to talk about how to help our kids learn from their mistakes rather than them repeating them, how to delay a consequence when you're just not sure what the consequence should be, and possibly a few other things. I just have to watch my time here because I don't want it to go more than 15 minutes. I know that your time is precious, and I want to make sure that I honor that. So a few quotes that I wanted to read to you that I find really important in this lesson is kids who are allowed, I'm going to go back to that for a second because that's really important. Kids who are allowed to learn from small mistakes early in life are far less likely to make tragic mistakes later in life. And we like to say that we want our kids to make as many mistakes right now. Like, we pray for mistakes. We pray for things to not go smoothly, for there to be as many bumps in the road as there can be, while the price tag is small. And hey, I'm not talking to strangers per se here. So we know that we've grown up with people from school who probably weren't allowed to make those small mistakes, or were not held accountable for those small mistakes, and therefore tend to make more larger mistakes as they've gotten older when the price tag is so much greater. And that's really tough. So if we can think about those people and maybe even learn a little bit from, maybe their parents didn't allow them to just fail enough, and maybe they didn't say to them, hey, yeah, this sucks. You got an F in the assignment. You got held back in third grade. Yeah, it hurts and it stinks. However, there are some really great lessons that can be learned from this. And if we can encourage our kids to think about life in that kind of capacity, then it naturally makes you a more empathetic parent. And it really allows the kids to be able to take control over what their behaviors are or over what their choices are, and let the consequences actually be the bad guy instead of mom and dad being the bad guy or the teacher being the bad guy. It allows those things to just naturally happen. All right, so we're going to talk about this. Empathy allows us to hold our kids firmly accountable without losing their love or respect. And that's what so many parents are afraid of. They're afraid that somehow if they really, parent, I guess, that somehow their kids are going to just not love them anymore, and they're not going to want to talk to them when they get to be older. Well, quite opposite is true. Most people that I know that don't have relationships with their mom or their dad or some adult in life, it's usually because that adult either betrayed them or somehow didn't really show them that they really loved them enough to be firm and to hold them accountable. So it's really this interesting myth that I think some people have, and I don't feel as though that's something that I've heard from you all through the talks that we've had, but it is an interesting perspective. So anyway, so Dr. Charles tells a funny story in one of the videos about how when he was a kid, and I'm taking literally a 22-minute video and I'm condensing it into just a few minutes here. He talks about, the video is called Sad Rather Than Mad. And he talks about a time when he grew up in Colorado and how they built I think it was like a Coney Island hot dog stand. And he lives out in the middle of nowhere growing up as a kid. And so anyway, long story long, every time they would pass by the Coney Island hot dog stand, his parents would say, stop asking me. That's a bunch of garbage. We're not going to stop there. What do you think? Money grows on trees. We don't have enough money. Well, when his parents started implementing Love and Logic, which was like right when Dr. Charles was probably about 12 years old. So he lived half of his life as a non-Love and Logic family and half of it raised as a Love and Logic household. One day his mom said, well, do you have your money? Do you have your wallet? And he did. And she said, sure, we can stop. And so they stopped, and he bought a hot dog and a large Coke, and he bought fries, and he bought all this stuff that usually his mom would say, you're going to get that, and you should do that. And apparently he had a little bit of a weight problem growing up anyway, but his mom decided to just not say anything. Just let him have the experience. Well, as the story goes, they're traveling through these mountainous, these highways that only have 2 lanes, and they're weaving in and out. And I've been on that highway in Colorado actually, and he starts to feel really sick after eating the hot dog and the drink and everything so fast, and of course, ends up they have to pull over at some point so that he gets sick on the side of the road. And he said he just kept waiting for his mom every time they passed that Coney Island stand to say, remember the time that you got so sick, and you remember you don't eat that stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And he said instead his mom showed empathy, that she was just so sad for him, and asked him, what do you think you would do different next time? And he was like, I'm definitely not going to eat in the car, and I'm probably not going to cram that much food down my throat. Now, while this is a really small example, the example still has a great meaning, which is, and the final part of the story is that every time they passed by the Coney Island stand, he would just wait for his mom to say, remember that time? To kind of like she had buried the hatchet, but just left the handle sticking out enough so that she could remind him about it later. But she never did. And that's a really good message for us in parenting, is that we need to allow our kids, even though we might see the forest for the trees and we might have a crystal ball to know this is probably most likely not going to end up very well, it's still really important to go ahead and let them do that and let them experience it versus telling them how it's going to turn out bad, because they can never internalize us just articulating that it's going to turn out bad. So the other thing is to not lecture afterward and to say, see, I told you so. And, at least this time you, blah, 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 all the stuff that we like to do as parents for some reason. I think that we like to hear ourselves talk sometimes. But that's really important to just let the experience be the experience and to move on from it. Because that was really a very pivotal story for Dr. Charles as a kid to remember that moment, especially because he was overweight and it was related to food and things. And I'm sure it was more, obviously more emotional and more of a connection for him than it would be maybe for some of us. But the lesson is still using that empathy and allowing those consequences to go ahead and mold and shape the experience for the child versus us doing it for them, telling them what to do, telling them what not to do. So I just want to kind of go through a fun little activity that we do in the class. And while you can't answer me, I want to give you just a few seconds to think about these. And I say just a few. Anyway, talking about different ideas of what would be some affordable mistakes to allow our kids to have, and then what would be some unaffordable mistakes. So would this be affordable or unaffordable? Forgetting their lunch in the morning, forgetting it on their counter, and going to school and not having any lunch. Totally affordable. You're right. I knew you guys would get this. Refusing to eat dinner at nighttime. Totally affordable. Kids can go a couple days, even if they're very small eaters, without having any food at all, and they will live and they'll be fine. And what I tell my kids, because I'm not a short order cook, is this is what you have offered for, this is what I've offered you for dinner. You're welcome to eat it until the kitchen is closed, and our kitchen gets closed at 8 p.m. Lights out, dishes done, counters clean. Nobody goes in for anything after that. And that's just kind of our rule. We don't like to have nighttime snacking, so that's why. And basically, I say to them, if you don't want to eat what has been offered to you, that's fine. You'll have a really good breakfast in the morning. And the other night, I guess while I was gone to band practice, Carter had to say that to Ellie Moon. And in fact, she was like, "This is a bunch of crap." And she pushed her chair in, and he said, "I'm so sorry, you're going to have to go to your room." And so she went to her room, and when she came back out, it was after 8, and so her dinner plate was put away, and she was very upset about that, but she did go to bed with no dinner. And she woke up the next morning, and she was perfectly fine, and she did eat a really great breakfast. And so the bottom line is teaching them that sometimes we can be flexible about things, sometimes we can't, but it's okay. If you want to go without, that's fine too. Chatting with strangers online, affordable or unaffordable? We think unaffordable, especially at really young ages. I'm even shocked that some of my son's 5th grade friends have Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and all that stuff, and that just really, I guess it also depends on the kid and how mature they are, but yeah, I think probably pretty unaffordable to be just chatting with random strangers. Totaling their tricycle on the lawn, affordable, and hope that it happens. Even getting bicycles stolen, totally affordable, and would love for it to happen because you learn from those mistakes. Wasting allowance at age 13, yeah, totally affordable. Wasting bank accounts at age 33 when you have a family, kids, probably not very affordable. So good for them to have those experiences very young versus waiting until the price tag gets larger. So you see where I'm going with this. Empathy is really important to use when we're talking about holding them accountable and allowing consequences to just be what they are. And I do have a reading, but I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want to take up too much of our time. And yeah, so basically the whole gist of the power of empathy is that the most successful parents, okay, use about the same consequences. The consequences can be the same, except for they use empathy when they are delivering the consequences, or, if you're having to remove technology or something like that, let's just say, they allow empathy to come first. Sorry, my computer's locked. I hate this thing. It's refurbished. They use them with empathy instead of anger, frustration, or sarcasm. And truly, that I do believe is a huge key to really allowing our kids to internalize what is happening to them, is by removing our own judgments of either how bad it is or how terrible it is. That doesn't mean that we're never going to get angry at our kids. It doesn't mean that we're not going to yell at them. It doesn't mean that we're not going to freak out. It doesn't mean that we're not going to lecture them. But if you can take, every time something happens with your children and you take, 20 instances and you use the lecturing, anger, or frustration for about 3 of them, and you allow the other consequences to take place with empathy, those other times are your really big fish, and those are the times we want them to be like, oh, ooh, my mom and dad don't usually do this, and so this is a really big event. I know some parents that like to do it all the time. That's their MO. So I'm stopping this now for just a moment. I'm going to re-record a new one for you.